Kia ora, ladies and gentlemen, good evening and welcome to Citizen A, where we wrap the week's current affairs with the best political team on television from a very Auckland perspective. Warning, we're as fair and balanced as Fox News. Joining me tonight on my revolving panel of bloggers and Auckland opinion shapers to dissect the budget. He runs the best independent news site in New Zealand. He makes Edward R. Murrow look like Paul Henry, the voice of reason in a time of multimedia spin. Editor of Scoop.co.nz, the ever-brilliant Selwyn Manning. And he is the Darth Vader of the blogosphere, minus the moment of redemption at the end. He's the thinking woman's bitter crumpet, if you define thinking woman as rabid right-wing mouth foamer who would sell their children's body organs on the free market just to make a point about supply and demand dynamics. Storm blogger Cameron Slater, welcome to you both. Coming up tonight, issue 1, it's the Citizen A budget special. What does it all mean politically? Issue 2, we look at the impact of the budget on you, the punter. Issue 3 tonight, we break from the budget to look at the comments of the Deputy Mayor of the Auckland Supercity that the Auckland Supercity isn't working. Surprise, surprise. And we'll end the show on a final word, but let's kick things off with issue 1. John Key spent all week softening New Zealanders up for a zero budget during one of the steepest recessions in an election year. So, was it the father of all budgets and drag? Was it the mother-in-law of all budgets? Or was it a budget Hone would describe to as a mofo of all budgets? Selwyn, the spin has been that this is moderate, this is moderate, this is moderate. If you are one of the 40% of New Zealand earning less than $20,000, how moderate has it been?
I wouldn't call it moderate, I'd call it the great New Zealand swindle here. You know, really, all of this is doing is marking time with the current levels of debt, the current levels of, you know, mismanagement until such time as the new election comes about, and then you watch, then it will actually show its true colours. This is an absolute, but it's an absolute mask. You've got to admit, Cam, you love it, do you? Is this going to do the business for your people?
Hold on.
Bill English's budget is actually going to do the business for Cam Slater and Whale Oil's people.
John Key's a wolf in sheep clothing.
No, I'm not interested in John Key. To be honest, I think next term he'll be gone burger anyway. But this budget is not a true fact of what is going to actually materialise next year. You would have to agree.
So it hasn't been moderate. Okay, Cam, this is one big unfunny joke, isn't it? As a good friend of John Key, you must be pretty embarrassed for him. This budget, and you know it, only looks good if we accept the Treasury growth predictions. In May 2008, Treasury forecast growth rates for the next 3 years of 1.5%, 2.3% and 3.2%. Instead, we got negative 1.1%, negative 0.4% and negative 0.1%. Treasury's claim of 4 to 5% growth demands, does it not, that we urine test Treasury for smoking meth? Yes or no?
Absolutely we should.
Yes.
I've always said that Treasury have got their numbers wrong. When Labor was in government,
is saying the same.
When Labor was in government, Treasury forecasts were appalling.
That's right.
And they haven't improved at all.
So how can we trust if they're saying 4 to 5? You know, look, we'll get back to surplus. It's all going to be okay. How can you trust those predictions, man?
This is where some of the cuts should have cut home. You know, into Treasury and places like that, because we can't trust them. Right, so we can't trust them.
And
let's
by
chop
proxy,
them out.
we can't trust the finance minister to have got this right.
But it'd be
surely.
the same Treasury people that'd be advising.
Yeah.
So we can't trust
But
their
what I'm
politicians.
getting at is this whole budget was pitched at us over the last 2 weeks of getting the fundamentals in the economy
right.
right. If they cannot get Treasury correct on this,
there are
then
some
the whole
critical
thing is
areas
actually
on
a
this
footing
budget
that's not
that did need to be addressed.
Okay.
The first one, and I agree with Selwyn on this, and it's not often you'll hear that, but we can't keep borrowing the amounts of money that we're borrowing.
Yep.
And so we do have to get the budget balanced. We do have to move to that a whole lot faster than what Labor is doing. And this is where an area where Labor has no credibility at all, because their solution was to
borrow. Hold
on.
Well, no, they've actually moved the time frame forward to be according to
false numbers.
Exactly. Come on, it brings back to the point. How can you trust those numbers, Kim? Come on. How can you trust them, man?
Well, I mean, if we were on the premise that we can't trust any numbers, then why do we have a budget?
No, that's not the case. But they have been
way
out, haven't they?
Oh, look, there needs to be something seriously looked at in Treasury. But again, who's the minister responsible? Bill English, isn't it?
Okay, but can you trust them when they say 4% growth in 2 years? Do you believe it?
The only numbers that I've ever seen Bill English deliver is 20.9%.
Very good. Selwyn, the government have sensed New Zealanders, and Cam's right on this, that we can't keep borrowing larger amounts. But does that mean, and this is where I probably disagree with Cam, does it mean they want public services slashed, or does it mean that they're ready for politically difficult decisions like capital gains tax? Where is the mood on the electorate?
I don't think a national-led government will impose a capital gains tax on the country.
They should.
There may be some talk relating to a property tax, which is slightly different here, but capital gains, they won't do it. They're as loath to do it as what the Labour Party was during its time. There are all sorts of areas where they could. This is a government that hates tax. You know, it wants to reduce tax. Yeah, but at the same time, it cuts its revenue and then actually maintains government and expenditure that increases.
The trouble with
the
trouble with the government is they're addicted to popularity.
I don't care what another party's plans are or another politician's plans are. If they've got a plan, you can respect that. This one cuts the income and increases or maintains spending at old levels. This is 2008
and I agree with that.
You know, we criticise Labour for increasing its spending. And
as we were watching the budget, that's exactly what I said to Bomber. I said, the problem that we've had is National came in and they kept the spending promises of Labour. They promised that they would keep them.
Yeah, that's right.
And Labour's been hoping that they'd break a promise, and they haven't broken a promise. But in order to keep those promises, because Cullen's structural surpluses evaporated the moment Cullen was no longer writing the box.
Exactly.
But the structural spending remained. And so we do have to have that come to Jesus meeting with the electorate and say, no, we can't afford these things.
But that structural change was so that you could offset the 1990s neoliberal agenda to reduce people's wages, right? That was the structural issue. It was about looking at that. Hold on, Cam, for all the bitching from the left, right? The reality is Key is taking this to the electorate, which you've got to applaud him for, right? So is National's strategy simply gambling on Labour's inability to get polling traction so National win by default with unpopular policy? Is that where it is?
I think what John Key's saying is that we said that we'd do certain things in 3 years.
He's got to build that trust up, right? He's got to build that trust up.
We've done those things because everyone was told for 9 years you can't trust the Tories. Right? You can't trust the Tories.
Because we couldn't last time they were in.
Well,
they earned that distrust, didn't they? Let's not pretend it didn't come out of nowhere.
Roger Douglas, David Cagle,
Ruth Richardson,
Phil Goff. He forgets he was in that cabinet.
He forgets a lot. He's a very old
Phil
man.
Goff said today this is the worst budget in 27 long years that he's been in Parliament. The worst budget. He obviously doesn't remember Roger Douglas's budget in 1984.
So they're just hoping that Labour
doesn't remember 1987. Doesn't remember the mother of all budgets.
He doesn't remember a lot.
He was asleep in that 27 years in Parliament. So this is the worst budget. This is a C+ budget at best. It's certainly not an F budget.
Okay, both of you. Don Brash wrote John Key a Dear John letter this weekend. If National and ACT have the parliamentary majority after the election, what will this budget look like under Finance Minister Don Brash next year? What will it look like?
Well, I think, that document is a blueprint for all the wants of the ACT Party leader now. I think at least we know that we have a guy that's leading that party that has some principles and ideals. May not agree with them.
It's called Year Zero.
May not agree with the methods, but at least he has a plan. Now, I disagree that this is a C+ one, and from this point of view, they're not even being honest, Cam. I disagree with that. The National-led government here put out a budget. It put out a budget here, and it's saying we're going to have a zero budget. Now, that is not an honest budget. Next year, if it's re-elected, we know that they're not going to be satisfied with a zero budget. They'll be going into negative budget and really slashing down and spending.
You guys all said that was going to happen in this term.
No. We said on those 3 ticket items, tertiary, look at tertiary eligibility, exclusion protocols placed in there. Those are fundamental changes. We identified others. I've been speaking on other media all for the last 2 weeks relating to where those cuts
But those tertiary exclusions are there for a reason. They're to stop lending money to people who have no intention of ever paying it back.
On the scrap heap for them?
Getting back to the main premise here, we know that the way the political shift is going, ACT is going to have a very, very persuasive effect on National coming after the election. Now, that means that these policies that were put out and these targeted funds, the zero budget, is meaningless when it comes after November.
And that is the problem with MMP, because...
this is MMP.
No, it is.
Come on, you love MMP. You're an MMP baby.
MMP is the politician's convenient excuse for never having to deliver your promises.
And first past the post was an old man's sleep.
I don't agree with first past the post.
No.
Right? So hang on. Phil Goff's going to make a whole lot of promises as well.
Yeah.
And Bomber, as the Mana Party's mouthpiece,
Good friends of the Mana Party.
Is saying that the Mana Party is going to be in a position to deal with Labour. The same thing happens if people vote for Labour and they get the Mana Party as well.
But it doesn't
then I'll say,
I'm
not criticising the system. I'm talking
Labour's
about the integrity of this budget.
Yep, Labour's going to not talk about capital gains tax. They're going to make the Mana Party and the Greens talk about it. And then come up the election, they're going to go, oh, sorry, people, we're going to have to tax your houses because it's part of the MMP environment.
The point, just quickly, in terms of that's what people have always said about John Key. Now, people have always said that the second term would be the full-bodied, creamy flavour. The first was light Labour, wasn't it?
At least he's putting it to the people.
Which, yeah, exactly. I think we've all got to acknowledge that. To both of you, one word to describe the 2011 budget. What's that one word?
C+.
C+?
Swindle.
Swindle. And competent is my word. Politically, which party wins and who loses from this budget? What's your call?
I think ACT wins because they can still point to the high debt levels. If you have a look at what's one of the tables that they produce? Up to 29% of GDP on borrowing. Just ridiculous amounts of debt. Labour can't answer that.
Well, they can if they say we're going to increase taxes to pay for those things.
Oh, good on them trying to get that one through
right.
the electorate.
So politically, you think that's difficult.
They're going to be the dishonest ones, and we're not going to talk about tax increases. Right.
The jury's out on which party wins on this, but I tell you what, the losers, I believe, is going to be the National Party. I can see their vote block moving to the ACT.
They need that arrogance. They need that arrogance slapped down. People like Jerry Brownlee swanning around with the powers of God that walks the earth, doing nothing
Henry
with
VIII,
it.
I am.
Doing nothing with it. You know, there's still people who don't have houses
or
heating, simple things in Christchurch. Look at the Japanese.
Outside of Christchurch too, and that's where I say it's an unfair
Japanese
taxation system. If they had any credibility, they'd actually look at the imbalances there and do something about it.
Yeah, the stuff that's going on in Christchurch is not good enough.
No,
a lot of people aren't doing well.
Because the powers are all vested in Jerry, there's only one person to blame.
And it all comes down to Bill English's idea is to borrow more to try and actually balance the books.
Well,
that's just nonsense.
Okay, issue 2. So, past the politics, how does this budget impact you, the dear taxpayer? Selwyn, during such a deep recession, is this the budget that will take the New Zealand economy forward and with it New Zealanders' living standards? I mean, we've been waiting for them to go up. Is this the budget?
No, it's not. And I don't see a budget in train that's going to do it either. You know, we're in dire times here. And what we're seeing is a finance minister that only a month ago said, I haven't got a plan in my back pocket. There is no confidence in that. This is an election year. Really, the people should have an opposition that they're able to actually see a cabinet in waiting. There's a challenge to all parties in Parliament at the moment to stand up and be credible and be a cabinet in waiting ready to take
It's worse than that, Selwyn, because National's Plan A, forget the budget as a plan. Bill English's Plan A was this budget. National's Plan A was to get 48%.
Yeah, and that's not going to happen.
That was their Plan A. They're sitting here in caucus talking about how they're going to do this and do that. They're busily polling and proving to themselves that they can do it alone.
Yeah.
And they don't have a Plan B, and Don Brash ripped Plan A to pieces.
Absolutely, and I've seen the faction shifts even from the outside of the National Party. People like Crusher Collins being the basic line where once we're attached to the centrists, moving across in a shift over to the right.
It was fascinating.
There's substantial changes in there, and that will reflect in policies post-election.
And with the Sookie Pinkos like Simon Power giving
up.
Exactly.
And so there's nothing to anchor it.
It was fascinating having Jacinda and Nikki on the show, and Nikki was convinced they would get over.
Well, she's a Simon Power.
Just convinced they
well,
would
they're talking about it in caucus. They talk over and over and over every week. This is what the polls are showing. We're going to win this. Stephen Joyce is living and dying by the polls.
Cam, those farmer mates of the National Party will be pretty happy, won't they? Turns out they barely pay tax as well as steal and pollute our water while selling us milk and cheese at eye-watering world prices. Are the farmers okay, Cam?
Well, we saw today today and yesterday what an enthusiastic first-term MP can do with a little bit of research. Stuart Nash came up with an absolute pearler, something David Cunliffe should have been doing.
Didn't you whisper that in his ear?
Absolutely not.
Perhaps he's a replacement for Tremaine and Napier then,
I don't think he will, though. That's the problem. Maybe he should stay. Bomber had a suggestion, I think, was to stand in Epsom, wasn't it?
Selwyn, public service mergers are being kept secret until after the election. Is the writing on the wall for public servants and public services?
Oh, the writing's not on the wall, it's in the ink on the page. we know. I mean, we've been told for the last
Less
year
people in IRD
that
would be a good start.
everybody's out. Yeah, IRD are the ones that are challenging
Chop them up.
Treasury's figures
Treasury,
on the
chop them.
projections here. IRD are the ones who are saying, no, the taxation projections are completely wrong. We're seeing
line
this
up
as
Treasury,
a big drain.
line up IRD, line
Billions
up
of
all the
dollars.
backroom people in MSD, and decimate them.
And you're right, Bomber, it does have to come back down to what public services, the essential services we're talking about, yeah? Not just the public
Well, the
services.
budget has funded those. Education and health, those have gone up.
Yeah,
right?
in certain targeted areas.
That's right, certain
But
targeted
we
areas.
know on the wards of Auckland Hospital at the moment, ADHB, that they're getting student nurses, some of them in their first year, to provide full-time equivalent there
Yeah, that's
when
not good
there
enough.
are
Hey,
registered
I tell you what,
nurses
that's not
on
good
holiday
enough.
or
That's not
pending
good
If
enough.
you
replacement.
think that's not good
They're
enough, don't
filling
go
it
to
up.
hospital on the North Shore.
Well, no, but this is Auckland Hospital, and we're talking about that's unfair for the students and it's unfair for the wards.
Shouldn't
Unfair for the
as a sport of conservative politics, shouldn't, and we're talking about how good it is that Key's going out and taking this to the electorate, shouldn't we know which public services are going to be merged? Shouldn't we? Before that happens?
Well, I don't think anyone knows what those are yet.
Oh, Jesus,
Let's
is it really that much of a...
let's look into the future on this. What we can see is the PPP model coming into effect post-election.
Yeah.
You'll have the infrastructure owned by the state, private providers coming in to deliver the policy, deliver the service. Yeah, and so that is what's going to happen. They'll argue
But if you do that, you can then put in rigorous metrics to ensure that the services are being delivered.
Well, it's an ideological, philosophical kind of
Can
argument.
KiwiSaver interest-free student loans and working for families are welfare that makes New Zealanders feel middle class? You and your right wing hate merchants, write them off as middle class welfare. Is the smile and wave political capital of John Key enough to pacify middle class New Zealand in this in this budget?
Well,
because he couldn't spook them, could he?
No, well, let's just have a look at some of those changes. In terms of working for families, what they've done is they've changed the abatement rates. They've changed the abatement rates. They've removed some of the largesse of working for families.
So large Catholic families are going to be very upset tonight.
Well, Bill English
No
is a
fish
large
for Friday.
Catholic family, so
Yeah,
I guess
so he's very
he must
upset,
have had that
yep.
checked off with the bishop. So.
But was that more for ACT? I mean, that's more because you're right.
It
It's
hasn't
just
gone
tinkering,
far
isn't
enough.
It?
It is tinkering.
Right.
If we look at the student loans again, it's decided to target and remove the borrowing of students that had either no appearance of wanting to repay or no ability to repay. And
so it is a poverty. If you're too poor to pay back, you don't get education.
There's a test going on, Bomber.
It's
test. All in the detail.
We've got a
Some
whole
would
lot
say
of
the
people.
devil's in the
We've got a
detail,
whole
and
lot
it
of people going and using student loans to get an education, but then not using that education to do anything with it.
It's abandoned the fundamental right of any individual.
Of getting education, right. So
you've still got the right to have that. You just haven't got the right to take it from the taxpayer.
Exactly.
Right?
Or to borrow,
or to
borrow
borrow for it.
But if they don't pay it back, they haven't borrowed it.
But in a recession, people.
We had
Do you want to garnish
the
people's assets
done on here. Our tax minister, on the
he's a
weekend
tosser,
on a program saying there was no problem with the actual students that were based in New Zealand paying back their. But what we did here is reality is that those that are overseas have not been paying back their student loans at things. So this is an absolute swindle here. We've got in the budget, they're actually targeting students and trying to have exclusion policies here to stop those from actually entering into it. It's an exclusion thing as to actually addressing where the problem is.
Anything Peter Dunn has
Once again,
to say.
it's a swindle.
He doesn't even know how much tax dairy farmers pay.
I'm not a fan of Peter Dunn, but I'm just saying, who do you believe here?
Exactly.
None of them, or
well, they're all politicians.
Okay, question to both of you. National always hated KiwiSaver interest-free student loans and work for families. Have they found the perfect excuse with the earthquakes and global economic recession to ready their ending as policy for all New Zealanders? Is this the beginning of the end for those policies?
No, I think with KiwiSaver what we're seeing is instead of the government borrowing money to put into people's KiwiSavers account, they're saying to people, you need to look after yourselves, and they're moving the funding of KiwiSaver rightly to the private sector.
What National has done on
that's fair enough.
What National has done on this is another Labor-like thing. You could imagine the right of Labor doing exactly what Bill English did.
Exactly.
That's not going to satisfy the stakeholder groups. It's not up to me to speak for them, but it's not going to do
Helen Clark extended working for families all the way up to 150,000. That was just ridiculous.
Question to both of you. Taxpayers have defied policy analysts by refusing to spend money. Is this budget enough security for them to loosen in their wallets, or has something fundamental occurred and changed in consumer culture in New Zealand? Your thoughts? Is this enough, or has actually something changed?
Well, I don't know whether something has changed. People, when they feel fear, they feel fear for their jobs or feel fear for anything, they do shut their wallets. They do start questioning about whether or not they want to spend the money.
So is this enough security?
But the fact is that New Zealanders were spending money they didn't have in the first place.
And
they
now
were
now the national-led
spending.
government is doing that, but the actual people of this country are not.
Yeah.
And that's the irony in the whole thing.
So, you know, debt-fueled spending is not good. It's not good for your household. It's not good for the government.
Well, this is a message Bill English should actually saturate himself with.
Well, it's a very simple message, and if you did take that message...
You know, but what's worse with the national government is it goes out and it actually says, okay, we earn this much. You know, we're working 5 days a week. And it says when it comes into office, actually, we're going to trim our revenue down to 2 days of work a week, but we're going to keep our spending up at the levels of when we were actually in
Keynesians like Bomber think that's great.
No, absolutely. In terms of... we're all about increasing... We're all about increasing revenue and more taxes. In terms of taxpayers, who will win and lose in this budget? In terms of the taxpayers out there, who's going to win?
Well, the people that you were bleating about, those who are earning under
people I care about,
people who are earning under 20,000 or whatever the number was, they're actually net tax takers, not net tax payers. So net tax payers will be perhaps a little bit better off. Net tax takers won't be affected at all.
Better off, worse off, taxpayers in New Zealand?
The average person in New Zealand is in that middle ground, which is decisive in the election, right? They are not better off. Everybody knows that.
They're not worse off, though.
No, they are worse off. Come on. I mean, you and I probably fit into that middle ground. I don't know your finances, but we're worse off, man.
Not the government. It's not the government's job to pay for your retirement. It's
your
job to pay for your
retirement.
retirement.
But it's there to put out a budget that's fair and equitable and allows prosperous kind of environments within the country. It is actually blocked that. There's nothing for productivity for business in this. There's nothing for an export-led economy to develop out of this. There's nothing for your people in the business sector.
No, because the export-led economy is, we all know what that means if Bill English is saying it.
Well,
means that his mates and the farmers can do it.
Why can we borrow 120 million a week for tax cuts where we can't borrow for
let's get real on export-led. This government, when it came into office, actually took away every assistance that was in place for those in the export-led areas.
Are you talking about R&D?
Yeah, all that kind of thing.
Yeah, come on,
you know, that worked.
R&D was a rort.
Coming up, we move on from the budget to focus on the Deputy Mayor Penny Holz's comments last week that the Super City isn't working. Surprise, surprise. Citizen A is back after the break. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. This is Citizen A. We're reviewing the week with Selwyn Manning and that awful Cameron Slater. Issue 3 tonight, moving away from the budget to astounding comments made by the Deputy Mayor of Auckland's Super City that the Super City isn't working. Penny Holz told a public meeting in the Waitakere this week that the government was now repeating the worst mistakes that have been made with the Super City and a plan to centralise Auckland's civil and family court services. The Super City is expensive, it's unwieldy, and it's unfriendly to communities. Selwyn, Penny Holz is speaking the truth, isn't she? The Super City is expensive, unwieldy, and unfriendly towards communities. How does that change?
It changes by raising it right now so that by the time it comes around for another local government election year, there is some kind of mood for change, to restructure. I'm sure Cam would agree that this whole thing is a dinosaur that's only a matter of years old. It's a dinosaur that's around everyone's neck. It's a failure of Rodney Hyde's brainchild, National allowing it to go through. It's an absolute disgrace. When did National become a party that wasn't just positioned politically in the centre, but was one of centralising some sort of control? I thought they were ones of freedom and openness.
I think what you've seen here is Rodney Hyde captured by officials in Wellington coming up with a solution that's supposed to help Auckland.
He must be weak-minded if that's the case. I mean, surely a minister is able to kind of develop some sort of governance.
It's a complete bollocks. It really is. Yeah. I mean, we've got cases of untendered $20 million contracts, untendered. Yeah. That hasn't hit the news yet, but it's only a matter of time. You've got cases where the incompetence of the council officers is being covered up. It's the old mushroom principle. Beyond, they're not telling the councillors what's going on.
From what I could pick up from what Penny Hulse was saying, it was clearly that the communities that make up Auckland were losing their voice. That Auckland and the super city has become this very tight, ignored.
But again, Len Brown said he was going to pass a lot of things to the community boards, and he just hasn't delivered on that.
The Aucklander reported this week that the new council paid $8.7 million to consultants in its first 5 months for planning reports because of a shortage of planning staff. The super city only has 7,800 staff when it was supposed to have 8,500 staff, which is down from the 10,000 staff for the councils it was replacing. The supposed savings promised by Acton National when they ran this through Parliament are not happening. And your mate, Cameron Brewer's answers are more cutbacks. Why? Why are you going to cut staff back further from the 7,800?
Well, I'm not sure that Cameron Brewer's my mate, but I'm not sure cutbacks are the answer either. I've seen it up close and personal, what's going on amongst the council officers, and a bunch of average plonkers essentially were the ones who got the jobs, and people who actually excelled in something that they knew about seems to have been passed by the wayside.
I'll tell you what Cameron Brewer was pushing. It was basically a move to try and get Len Brown to silence Penny Hulse from speaking out on how much it's in disarray. I mean, what's he represent here? The National Party, basically. But he was trying to actually silence those who are critiquing.
It's not good enough that he's trying to silence Penny Hulse.
I think Penny Hulse, absolutely it's not good enough. But I think that you're going to see a call for de-amalgamation start rising up. I think you're going to see a campaign for de-amalgamation.
You know what I think would be great would be to lift the lid on the silence and the shroud that is around all the CCOs and to allow some sort of light into that. You know how you talk about this kind of thing. I mean, is that X plan to lock it away in private type of
Because remember, look at the board appointments process. Len Brown kept that secret until the last minute.
You know, the whole structure is wrong. And John Banks comes out and blames it on the leadership. Well, it sounded like he was campaigning for the Mayoralty, not Epsom.
Selwyn, doesn't this failing of the super city go back to the manner it was ran through Parliament under a misuse of urgency? Isn't that the reason for the oversights in the super city?
We've seen bad legislation coming out for some time because there isn't the debate from the opposition benches. There is an imbalance.
Opposition's doing a crap job, aren't they? Opposition's doing a crap job.
And there's an imbalance in the politics, in the debating chamber, in the general debate, and in question time. You know, you see every week that Parliament is sitting, you see the Prime Minister laughing at his counterparts across the bench.
Well, they are laughable, aren't they?
Yeah, it's laughable both ways because at the end of the day, smiling Teflon John is not actually getting the respect that he deserves as a Prime Minister by title, and he's not getting the respect amongst the public. I kind of wonder whether or not Nationals hit a tipping point here.
But Labor gave up about 3 weeks after the election.
They did. They
still think that the electorate was woefully misdirected and not voting for them.
I was sitting there watching from the public benches a little while ago, watching not only the front benches yawning, but the back benches on the opposition benches yawning. That's not what they're paid for. They are to be advocates for the people who need a decent go in this
Barker playing patience on his iPad.
Cam, what spin do you use to blame Len Brown for all of this?
Well, just because I can.
Yeah. I know. It's what you do. But what in particular are you going to have a go at?
Rule number 10 of Whale Oil's Rules of Politics.
There's a lot of rules.
13.
Only 13?
Only 13.
Okay.
Rule number 10 is I'm telling the story.
That's the good thing about the media, get the last say.
Yeah.
Question to both of you. Len Brown says this is a work in progress, but doesn't he have to beef up his criticism to explain to Aucklanders how bad it's been designed? Least of all, they start blaming.
They've got to develop their ideal structure, and they've got to then lobby the legislators to make sure that occurs. All of Auckland
Brown hasn't the ability to do that. I mean,
you don't think he's staunch enough?
He ran a poor branch office for a law firm before he went into local body politics. He does not have the
Wynyard Wood's hardly poor. poor.
He's a nice guy, Len.
Wynyard
I mean,
Wood's
he really is,
poor.
but he's out of his depth. He seriously is out of his depth.
He's been in local government politics for longer than John Banks.
All I know
and the
is
public
that
recognised that. They voted for the man.
Behind the closed doors, whenever he is challenged, he caves, and that is Len's problem.
I haven't heard that. I've heard that publicly it's an issue. He's too nice a guy.
That's right. That's what I'm saying. He caves. He doesn't like confrontation. So if someone front foots him and says, "No, Len, we're not going to do that," he goes, "Oh, okay." Right? He's a nice guy.
Whether or not that's true or what, it doesn't matter. You know, the whole thing is that I don't know about everybody in this country, but I'm starting to get really sick of presidential type of structures in our politics. He has a team around them. That team needs to actually work.
It's not much of a
team.
I agree.
We expect that as voters of Auckland.
Who wins, who loses by pointing out how badly the Super City is working? Who wins, who loses?
Well, Aucklanders win if we actually decide to stand up.
Does Rodney lose again?
He's
Rodney lost.
Rodney who?
Rodney who? You talking? He's finished, mate. That's it.
Let's wrap the show.
End of story.
Let's wrap the show with last word. Sal, and your last word this week is?
For once and for all, why doesn't the National Party come clean and actually demonstrate what the budget would be post-election? Instead of masquerading in the centre ground, knowing that after the election it's going to go all the way over and basically put out something that was a Don Brash blueprint.
Final word, Cam.
Well, it's on the budget as well. I sat there today and I watched Phil Goff's rather boring, lacklustre response where he described that today's budget is the worst budget he's ever seen in his 27 long years of mediocrity in Parliament. And you really have to question whether Labour's got their research unit working properly. They've had that budget since 10:30 this morning. That's the best line that they could come up with. You know, do they forget Roger Douglas? Do they forget Ruth Richardson's mother of all budgets? It was called that for a reason. And if today's budget, which Selwyn said was a swindle, was lacklustre, wasn't dynamic.
You said swindle wasn't far enough.
Yeah, I said swindle wasn't far enough. If that's the worst budget in 27 long years of mediocrity by Phil Goff in Parliament, then he must have been asleep for an awful long time.
Thank you, Cam. Thanks, ladies and gentlemen, to my final word. The real story in this budget is about National Party economic incompetence. The economy was in decline well before the second Christchurch earthquake. Bill English described his GST tax rise, which subsidised the tax cut for the wealthiest New Zealanders, as turbocharging the economy. It in fact led to $1 billion deficit in our tax revenue. This is National's mistake and we are paying for it. While corporate media pundit after corporate media pundit tells us this zero budget in the worst recession this country has seen since 1929, Great Depression, is moderate and will simply tinker with the public services many New Zealanders in poverty need, the reality is that those on the bottom will be worse off after this father of all budgets and drag. Why should the poorest in New Zealand suffer and do with less for an economic recession they had no hand in making? How many solo mothers were on the phone to their Wall Street stockbrokers in 2007 buying light crude in euros while speculating on the Goldman Sachs derivatives markets? In the words of Scribe, not many if any. New Zealanders vote in November to decide if this do-nothing government's tax cuts for the rich at the cost of public services while corporate welfare escalates is really the country they want. Remember, these changes will be mild compared to what the next Finance Minister Don Brash will implement. A vote for John is a vote for Don. If you like tonight's show, please join our Citizen A Facebook site and connect with other like-minded news citizens and follow me on my Citizen Bomber Twitter and Facebook page. Thanks for watching, whānau. Good night, Aotearoa.
Supporting local content so you can see more of New Zealand on air.